Welcome to Hospitality on the Rise, the podcast about the people shaping the hospitality industry and their journeys. I'm your host, Alice Cheng, founder and CEO of Culinary Agents, hospitality's go-to hiring platform, and I'm here to give you your dose of virtual mentorship. Here, we'll be sharing the stories, lessons learned, and advice from hospitality leaders who've carved out their own path to success. After all, this industry is where many get their start and go on to do incredible things. Whether you're a pro, starting out, or just love the hustle, this podcast highlights what makes hospitality extraordinary: the people. We're so excited to have Kevin Boehm here with us today, co-founder, co-CEO of BOKA Restaurant Group, with over 40 restaurants that he's opened over the years, in addition to a wellness to be conglomerate, I guess, let's say, because I think there's more than one location. And we're going to hear all about it. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, what's up? How we
What's
doing?
going on?
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was just thinking 11 years ago or 12 years ago, this is our 13th year. And I think we met in our, my first year of Culinary Agents. We did start a little video mentorship thing, and it was like the very first recording in your office. We were on like a couch, and
Oh
it was like
yeah.
super dim lighting. The camera didn't work. I mean, shot on like an iPhone 6 or something. Anyway,
scrappy beginnings,
yeah.
I've got lots of scrappy beginning stories.
Exactly, and that's why we have you here, because we want to hear all about it. So without further ado, I'd love to hear about how all the things got started, how it's going, and what you've got up your sleeve.
Woo, that's a big question. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing probably got started, 34 years ago when I dropped out of college. I was one of those guys who kind of knew what he wanted to do at a very early age. I told my mom and dad that I wanted to open up my own restaurant when I was 10. Didn't really start thinking seriously about it till I got away to college, and I jumped in my beat up tin can of a Jeep. It was actually a Suzuki Samurai in 1991, and drove south. I was tired of the cold weather, and I wrote a fake resume. This beautiful piece of fiction that I wrote that had all restaurants on it that had mysteriously gone out of business, so they couldn't call for a reference check. And I got a job working at a restaurant called the Beach House. And it didn't take me long to figure out that I'd found my people. I was like, man, restaurant people are cool and sort of dangerous. I was like, these guys. And so I was addicted, and that led to me saving up enough money with my girlfriend at the time to open a little 6-table restaurant in the Panhandle of Florida, in Seaside, Florida, which has become very, very popular since then. We were the road is called 30A. I think we were the 10th restaurant on that road, and there's probably 800 restaurants on that road now.
Wow.
And so that's how it all got started. And so I ended up opening up 4 restaurants in the South. And the ultimate goal for me was always Chicago. I had grown up in downstate Illinois. I was enamored with Chicago. I would every so often come back and have dinner, just to show myself that I wasn't ready to open a restaurant there yet. It's kind of like when you're in smaller markets and you're trying to figure out whether you can hit a major league curveball or not. And I would go dine in New York or go dine in Chicago, and I'd be like, okay, I'm not ready for that yet. And then one day I just figured that maybe I was. And so I had coffee with a guy who was a mutual friend, who a mutual friend had introduced me to, and that was Rob Katz. And we had a cup of coffee at Nookie's in Old Town here in Chicago. And we were supposed to meet for 15 minutes. We met for 4 hours and just said, what's the worst that could happen? Let's open up one restaurant together. And that was BOKA.
I love it.
And so that was 22 years ago. And, just like when you're dating someone, business partnerships has this like feeling out process where you try to figure out if they're the right person or not. And so Rob and I spent 6 months kind of like trying to figure out if we could both, compromise, and if we were on the same page with things. And we figured out real quickly that we agreed 97% of the time, which I believe really is the secret to a good partnership. If you're constantly having to navigate decisions all the time, it's not going to work. But him and I agreed most of the time. And the 3% that we didn't agree on, nobody drew a line in the sand. And so here, Rob and I are 24 years being partners now.
That's so
Um,
incredible. That's so
and
incredible.
and we still like each other and go out to dinner and all that sort of stuff. It's fun. And so we kind of built this architecture that ended up becoming BOKA Restaurant Group, kind of sitting across the bar every night as we closed out at BOKA, and said, man, wouldn't it be a gas if we could like partner with a bunch of different chefs, and that would allow us to do all kinds of different concepts, and we could just be really creative. And that was the idea. And I guess we manifested it sitting there at the bar, drinking tequila at 2 o'clock in the morning in 2003, 2004. And here we are. And so companies, 3,000 employees now, and, almost 30 restaurants. And we'll be in, I don't know, 5 or 6 different states now. So
That's so incredible. And, you know, partnership is so important. And I would say at the foundation for the group that you've built, not just with Rob, tell him I said hi, by the way,
I will.
but with all of your chef partners and your growing partnerships with hotel conglomerates, with your own personal projects, et cetera. Do you have like what's the key to that success, right? You said that 97%, 3%, that's already a
Well,
little nugget
yeah,
there.
joint ventures are not easy. I mean, like, look at every rock and roll band in history. It's like it's everybody does things differently, and has different things that are important to them. And I think the key is the ability to understand somebody else's motivation for why they're doing something. We spend all this time in life saying like, I can't believe, or I can't understand why so and so would do that. But we're all different. We're all wired differently. And so getting those things on the table and constantly talking about them and not having too much judgment about those things, I think that's how you get there. I think that as long as you all want to get to the same place and you're rowing in the right direction, all the little stuff can be figured out. I think the problem is when two people want completely different endings, that's going to make the process be difficult. And I'm all about process. I mean, you know, there's
Hmm.
no there's no destination in all this crap. It's like this is what I do every single day. So if I don't enjoy the process, then we're doing it wrong. And so when, the first step is make sure you know who you're going to be partners with. Is the foundation of that person somebody that I like and respect and has integrity and all those things? And if that's all true, the rest of it can be worked out.
Yeah.
Rich Melman has that great quote, you can't do a good deal with a bad person.
Yeah.
It's 100% true. And occasionally you can be tempted by something that like, God, I know this person's not great, but man, this is a really good offer to do X. And like, I'm not tempted by those things anymore, but I have been in the past, and I've learned my lesson. And so, fortunately the chefs that I'm partners with, the people in our C-suite that I've worked with, some of them for 2 decades, are people that I really love and respect. And it's great to be able to walk into work and, have that kind of feeling and that kind of energy. It's contagious.
Yeah. Yep. Tell me, what were some of the or one of the biggest lessons learned throughout this process, right? It's easy to talk about your copy paste situation right now, not that easy obviously, but you're 40 plus locations in, so you figure out your process. But as you were starting out in second location, fifth location, etc., what were some of the things that you learned along the
Well,
way?
it's a great question, because every time you add a couple restaurants, it's a different company. And so you keep trying to do the same things that you did before, and you're like, that might have worked with 2 restaurants, but it doesn't work with 11. And so I think, yeah, you can go through each of them. The very first restaurant, I learned that there are bad sizes to restaurants, and 6 tables is a really bad size. if two people don't show up for their reservation and you have 6 tables, you're kind of screwed. You might not eat the next day. Um, and so that one was like truly the bachelor's degree in everything that can go wrong in restaurants. And every day was just like, ooh, I'm never going to do that again. I mean, the oven blew up in my face on our first service and I went to the hospital. So, I mean, that was lesson one. The second place that I opened was a wine bar, sushi bar, rock and roll bar. And I learned at that place that 100 wines by the glass without a true Cruvinet system is pretty dangerous. You're constantly looking and you're like, I better sell this Jack London by the glass tonight because I opened it 2 days ago and that bottle cost me like $19. So constant inventory pushing, and the booking of live music in there was also a crapshoot. Never knew what you were going to get. Musicians showing up on time. I created a very difficult place for myself and sushi. And so, things that were, uh, highly, the waste can be a terrible thing if you're not constantly looking at all that and keeping hospital corners of waste. So, and then when I moved to Springfield, Illinois, and I opened up a restaurant with actually like real employees, my first restaurant was a staff of 2. The second restaurant was a staff of 4. And then I moved to Springfield, Illinois, and I had a staff of 40. Wow. And then you figure out that teaching is so much more important than executing. And that, if you're trying to do everything yourself and I was trying to wrap my arms around everything and not share enough with people. So I think that's really where I learned that if you're not teaching and you're not sharing every line item of the P&L with everybody, then you can't really ask them to do these things unless they really understand it. And then I went to Nashville, and that's where I learned all the lessons, the most lessons I ever learned, because I failed. And if we're a good detective and we can look at ourselves in the mirror, which I really had to after that experience, and figured out where I got my feathers too high up in the air, but it was perfect because it led me to Chicago. And so, but man, every day is a learning process because the model keeps changing and the industry keeps changing,
Yeah.
And the
motivation,
people keep
you on your toes.
People keep you on your toes. Well, the people want different things too. I mean, like when I first started out, that restaurant that I first worked at, everybody in that restaurant wanted to be screaming crazy busy every night. They liked the intensity. We only got mad when we weren't sweating and going 90 miles an hour with our hair on fire. But not everybody likes that today. It's a different lifestyle. People want more balance and they want more ease. And so this industry's been turned on its head several times. So I think that's why it's been so hard for restaurants, the old school restaurants that I saw and grew up with, to also be part of the new school. That I'm really impressed when you see a company like Lettuce Entertain that started in 1971 still being so vital. What that shows you is they've had the ability to be self-critical and to evolve and constantly look at what they're doing and change it. I mean, that's the key, man, is to be able to look and say, we stink at this. Let's be better at X, And so we do a lot of that. And we hire people that are squeaky wheels too. I like, the people that are on our C-suite, our directors, our VPs, they're people that, are not afraid to get into a meeting and say, this sucks, let's be better,
Yeah. And, thank you for sharing, because we too often hear all the positive stories and celebrate them, which we absolutely should continue to do. But not often enough do we hear about the failures or the lessons learned, the way that somebody has gotten to all the accolades and the awards. So it's nice to know that you are human, Kevin.
Well, listen, you do it. I am very human. Like you do enough of these things and you're really taking it to the edge and you're really trying and you're taking chances. Some will not work. It's just a fact. It's a very difficult business. And sometimes you are one block or a price point that's 10% too high or the wrong concept at the wrong time away from it being a success. It's so tight, man. You know, like like great design, great hospitality, great food with a foundational business support system that's underneath it. It's really easy to say. It's only four things. It's really hard to do and to execute. And for a big company, every time you go out and do more, if you're not adding people or people aren't getting smarter, then you're just watering down the culture and all that sort of stuff. So that's the difficulty when you want to grow.
Yeah, and I'm gonna latch onto that because I feel like there's something in the water in Chicago because the restaurants and also the sheer size of them and the fact that so many of them are under these partnerships and umbrellas, whether it's Let Us Entertain You or BOKA, et cetera. There's a lot of different groups and
Hogsall, One Off
yeah, exactly.
Hospitality, Gibson's Group.
Yeah.
Um,
It's one of the cities where you can point to groups that really have multiple locations that, are seemingly living their own best lives, right? They're like coexisting and successfully. So I want to talk a little bit about the growth of your team and the culture over the years, because that is probably one of the most challenging things as well, right? Continuing to motivate, to promote, to excite while you have these kind of sub brands, if you will, like the partners that you have. Um, what's your trick there?
Well, first of all, we're lucky because we have grown, it creates new positions. So, we have about 80 people in our corporate office, and there's a place for somebody to go within our own company. That's the hard part with just having one place. You have the most incredible general manager in the world, and you have one restaurant. It's tough to find a space for them if you're not creating a bigger company. So that certainly helped. Our model, where we give the chefs in our company real equity in the individual LLCs, has allowed us to keep these partnerships with these chefs alive and do multiple restaurants with them. So that certainly helps. And so, we always say like the first step is like, you want to grow within our company, be great and you'll rise. And if you look at it, the COO of our company started as a bartender. Abby Kreitzler, who's our chief culture officer and executive director, started as a cocktail server at Landmark. Jamie Madonia, our CFO, started as a consultant in our financial department. Taylor Crowley was doing events at the Hotel Lincoln. She's now our chief marketing officer. So we've been able to grow from within. And it's a great thing to point to when people started the company, that they're not looking at, everybody that's in our C-suite and they're all people that came 15 years later. They're not. There are a lot of people that were able to move and navigate through our company. So I think that's one of the hallmarks of what we've done hiring wise is like, say, the sky's the limit, man.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and that's the only way that we get there is like talented people stay with us and want to stay with us, and we'll provide new jobs for them. And we also look for talent in unusual places. Our the VP of business strategy, worked for Microsoft for a decade. And she was just more intrigued by the restaurant business than she was the tech business. So we've had some people that from different educational backgrounds who've ended up in our restaurant group. I think the restaurant business has become much more sophisticated over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
The people looked at it and they're like, wait a second. If I approach this from a more intellectual standpoint, you can really be successful in this business. Because we always talk about how fraught with peril the restaurant business is, right? And it certainly can be, but it can also be an incredible business. And so, through 3 decades, it's been hard as shit, but like we've been able to make hay, because we've surrounded ourselves by really smart people.
Yeah. And, I can attest to you take risks and adopt technology like Culinary Agents where it makes sense. I mean, one of the things that we've seen over the years, because we push heavily, is the professionalism, this is a career. If you want it to be, it can be. And here are examples of how people have done it. And we're seeing more and more of that just permeate throughout all positions and attitudes, in the industry. And examples such as yourself and Rob and the leadership team that you have just, are great beacons of inspiration.
I love looking at the timelines on Culinary Agents for people because you see this crazy circuitous route to where they got, and I love restaurant history. I love hearing about, who was on the line at Stars in San Francisco in 1990. And it was, Dominique Crenn was a sous chef and Steve Ells from Chipotle was on Garde Manger. And, so I love looking at where everybody cooked before, and it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it does a lot to not only inspire, folks who are thinking about entering the industry, but those who may be in it and are a little stuck, and trying to figure out how to get to the next step. So thank you for being such a big supporter of that. And, as a partner for many years, I can attest to your teams are really awesome.
Oh, thanks.
And I do not encourage or condone people to lie on their resumes, by the way, for the record.
I don't either, but it works for me.
Yeah.
What's funny is that interview, this guy, the general manager's name was Mike Bell, and Mike had asked me, he goes, Kevin, what's your favorite grape varietal? And I was like, that's a great question, Mike. I didn't know what he meant. And the owner was walking by and she's like, oh, I like this one. Mike, hire this one, and kind of gave me a little pinch on my cheek. And he was like, I guess you got the job. My first step was to go to the bookstore and figure out what he meant by grape varietal. And then I bought a bottle.
They knew.
Yeah. Then I bought a bottle of wine at the junior food store and bought a wine knife. And I just went home and kept sticking the cork in and trying to figure out how to open it.
And here you are today. A handful of years later. What are you, like 25 now or something?
Oh,
you reverse age every time I see you.
Well, please, I turned 55 this year, Alice.
No way.
55 years old.
Well, I'm going to segue that into your balance and health and wellness portion of your life. Because whatever you're doing, please share with inquiring minds. So as if these 40 plus restaurants and businesses weren't enough, a handful of years ago, you decided to open something, lifestyle wellness. Tell us a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, I mean, even though I've been able, to navigate the business world in these last 3 decades, the most difficult challenge for me was navigating happiness. I was been bipolar most of my life. Not diagnosed because I refused to go to a therapist or do any of that sort of work. I'd had a very strange sort of traumatic childhood. And, and when I got into my, early 40s, I started really making wellness a priority in my life and hitting the gym more and that sort of thing. And as I got into my late 40s, early 50s, mental health was just as important for me. So kind of mind, body, and soul, I was doing all these things in my life, but I was going to 10 or 12 different places to do it, So, I had a therapist, and I had a private yoga instructor, and I had a membership to a gym, and I got acupuncture and all this stuff. And I was like, man, what if I could help create a place where all this stuff was under one umbrella? And that's kind of what BIAN is. It's spelled BIAN, named after a doctor in 600 BC. He was the emperor of China's doctor, and his name literally means to transform. So we created this place that's kind of like Soho House meets Mayo Clinic meets a gym and a spa. We have 7 doctors in-house, full-time internist, doctor of Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic doctor, naturopath, psychiatrist. And so I was kind of building a place for myself to see if I could finally find happiness. It certainly helped. The restaurant business sort of saved my life. I was looking, for a replacement family for myself, and I kind of found it in the restaurant business. But I needed more help than that as I got older. It degenerated in me, and so I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life right now. But it came with a lot of effort. And so BIAN is emblematic of who I became and who I evolved to in life. And so there are certain rules and things that I follow now, that I need to follow, to be a happy centered person. And if I'm a happy centered person, I'm going to be a lot better at my job. And so I always have to remember that that's true, not just in me, but all the people that work, in our restaurants. So yeah, it's been a transformative last 3 years for me, between going to this incredible place called the Hoffman Institute and doing ayahuasca and, doing therapy multiple times a week um, uh, and getting on medication for the first time in my life and stopping drinking and a lot of things that were so additive to my life and completely changed the way that I live it. And so I'm glad I had BIAN as a backstop for all that.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. I mean, I think
Sure.
it's proof that, you can live the glitzy, can't get table at the hottest spot, owner of many, many locations, and constantly serving other people and making sure they're having a great time and they're taken care of, both guests as well as your team. And, doing the work on yourself is priority.
Yeah, I
So
would completely constantly deplete myself though. And so I started to find that, or I believed that manic moments were happy moments. So I would create a restaurant and open up a new restaurant. You'd get that huge adrenaline rush from an opening. And I'm like, this is happiness. And then you would crash and you would just want to do it again. And so it kind of, my own mental problems kind of fueled my ambition. Um, so I maybe not quite as ambitious as I used to be in this happier
I don't know
state,
about that.
but
I
that's
see the
okay.
roster of what's coming up.
Uh,
So,
yeah, I mean, the company's bigger than myself or Rob at this point. It's a living, breathing thing. Um,
but isn't that
but
kind of like the goal, right? You set
it
it
is
up,
to create something that gets set up, and then it doesn't need you to push it and move it every
right?
single day, even though you're an important part of it.
Yeah.
And so no, that's
That's like leadership goals. I mean, in many, aspects of any type of business, you to have that constant stress of being the bottleneck or the only one or the control, it's I know even for me as I'm getting older is like I enjoy it when I'm like, wait, I can take a walk for 30 minutes and not have to, check my phone because something's on fire, right?
yeah. I mean, we listen. That's right. We only get one spin at these things, and so instead of New Year's resolutions, I sit down every year and I kind of write my goals for the year, my rules for the year. And so I'm like, I'm 54 years old. I kind of know what works for me now. And so most of the time when I'm unhappy or life's not working, it's my own fault. And I can look at that sheet. I keep a sheet that I keep that laminated sheet in my kitchen and I look at it and I'm like, yeah, bro, you're not following the rules. Maybe if you do what you need to be in the gym at least 6 days a week or you're not, or you get temperamental or you don't feel quite right. So as long as I'm following the rules, I'm good.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I mean, and I'm going to segue into because I've always personally also admired on top of all the things that, it's always easier outside looking in, but you have a very um, wonderful gift of word. Right? You write really well. You've been a guest
Thanks.
writer for many different popular publications. And I heard a little birdie told me that there's a book coming.
There is. Yeah, I wrote an article a few years ago, um, I think it was an Esquire article, and I had started talking to a literary agent through that, and he had said, "Hey, you have any ideas for a book?" And I had shared a few with him, none of which he liked, and I said, "I do have a book that I do have an idea of something, but it's very personal." And he said, "This is the book." And so for the last 4 years, I've been working on it. It comes out in the fall. It's called The Bottomless Cup. It comes out in Abrams Press. Um, it's yeah, it's I'll just share the first line of the book, which is In the summer of 1989, halfway through a Western omelet and a cup of coffee, I found out that I wasn't really Kevin Boehm. So I'm not going to explain that right now, but
Ooh,
it starts with it starts with a mystery. And so, uh, yes, I have a very, very strange family background.
well, I for one am very excited to read it.
It's 3 stories. It's basically that story, the restaurant stories, and this kind of wellness journey that I've been on. But one of the great joys of my life was writing this book. I've loved the process of it. So
Well, and it sounds like and seems like it went hand in hand and fit into your whole kind of introspective, let's work on and thinking. You sound like
well,
you're putting in the work.
yeah, well, I got to write a book. I got to write a memoir while I was living it. Things would
Yeah.
happen in my life, and then I got to sit down and write them. It
Right.
wasn't just a look back. It was a look back, and then all of a sudden I caught up to my present life at the end of the book. And, a lot of things just happened to happen while I was finishing the book. And I had to change the ending like 3 times because the ending kept changing. And so such is life.
I love
Um,
it. I vote for putting all 3. Maybe you release the other endings, like, as a follow-up or, like a membership only, you get access to the other endings. Anyway, I won't put you on the spot anymore. What I will do is kinda circle back to you in leadership and hospitality and give you some quick fire questions.
sure.
Okay, what advice would you tell your younger self?
Oh my God. I tell myself not to take it quite so. No, I don't want to say that. It's not that I would tell myself not to take it seriously. I would I would tell myself not to worry so much, not to produce so much cortisol, and not to wake up with a panic attack every morning. Um, like, yes, it pushed me, but it was super unhealthy. I wish I could have found some more balance and just been kinder to myself in the early days.
Everyone should be kind to themselves. I like it. What's your advice for someone struggling in the industry?
Well, it's a pretty broad question, but to me, the first thing you have to do is write down what your problems are. The brain tends to catastrophize if you don't fill in the blank. And so I remember years ago, a guy who used to work for me called me and he was like, I'm so overwhelmed. There's so many problems. I don't know what to attack first. He was opening a restaurant. I was like, no, there's actually a finite number of problems. I was like, I'm going to hang up on you. I want you to call me back when you know how many problems you have. 2 hours later, he called me and he goes, Kevin, I have 137 problems. I was like, great, great. We know the number to it. It's not endless. I go, let's start chopping some off. And I worked with him on a few and I go, now you're on your own. But this business, there's so much coming at you all the time that sometimes you got to slow the game down and you got to sit and you got to be strategic in the morning and you have to map out. And the first thing you have to know is, where do I want to be? What's my intention and where am I trying to get to? And then you backcast it instead of forecasting it. He's like, this is where we are. How do we get there? And let's go backwards. And so sometimes there's just so much information. There's so much sense of urgency in this business. And I need you right now that it's hard to sit back and strategize how we get out of the shits, man. And you need a good mentor or a good friend that you can bounce ideas off of. There's maybe nothing more important than that. I'm so happy to have great industry friends. You know, Will Guidera and I talk every couple days and brainstorm about stuff. Donnie and Medea and I are very, very close. I have Rob. There's a great Aaron Sorkin penned parable, which is a guy falls into a hole and a doctor comes by and he goes, Doctor, I've fallen in the hole. And the doctor writes a prescription. He throws it in the hole and he keeps walking. And then a priest comes by and he goes, Father, I'm stuck in a hole. And the priest writes a prayer down and throws it in the hole and keeps walking. Then a friend comes by. The friend jumps in the hole with him. And he goes, what the hell are you doing? Now we're stuck in here together. And he goes, yeah, but I've been down here before and I know the way out. There's a million people who've been in that hole before. And I've talked to, you know, Danny and Richard Crane at Union Square Hospitality. I've talked to Melman. I've talked to, so many people who've helped me over the years when, I didn't know what to do next or I was panicking. So don't panic, strategize, find a friend.
What's your advice for fellow hospitality leaders?
Be great. Greatness is really hard and it has a pay-in process, but the reward on the other side of it is massively worthwhile. My mom said, if anything comes too easy to you in life, be skeptical of it. She told me that in like 1987. I had no idea what the hell she was talking about. I so know what she's talking about now. Life is like a pension. It was like when that oven blew up in my face, I was like, well, maybe I'm on the right track, And so, yeah, it's like, to be great, it is going to put you through your paces. But like I tell my kids all the time, like, earn your time off. When I used to get to Sundays and I knew that I had left it all out on the floor, I really enjoyed whatever I did on Sunday nights, whether it was eating dinner or watching White Lotus. It's like, it's earning your time. Most people think that happiness comes from pleasure. Most of happiness comes from self-respect. And the idea that you did a job and you did a job well done, and the self-esteem that you get from that is where a lot of people and most people find happiness. It certainly is where I came from. So put in the work, man, and then good things will happen.
I love it. Thank you so much. On that note, Kevin, we are looking forward to all of these. We didn't get into them. Maybe there's a part 2 to this podcast,
Sure.
But all of these upcoming projects, your book. Thank you so much for sharing your advice and your experience. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, just Zarella coming soon. Pizza place, Lee Wolin, Chris Pendel, 531 North Wells, where GT Fish used to be. And then we're doing a new restaurant with Brian Lockwood, who is the chef de cuisine of 11 Madison Park, called Gingy, also on Wells, coming soon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And you have Elliot Astor right now in Florida and Valley.
Yes.
Yeah, we got all
lots of stuff. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you. Stay tuned for more. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Alice.
Remember, success looks different for everyone in hospitality. No two paths are the same. If you have a leader or a topic you want to hear about, email media@culinarygents.com. Hospitality on the Rise is brought to you by Culinary Agents, connecting top talent with employers since 2012. Whether you're hiring or looking for your next opportunity, join us at culinarygents.com. For more inspiration, subscribe to Hospitality on the Rise and visit hospitalitycareerpaths.com, a free platform by Culinary Agents. Until next time, keep rising!